Blue Ridge Mountains, 1998. We were 6 men on a routine foot patrol, cutting through a service tunnel that wasn't on any map we'd been issued. The concrete was dry, the air stale, and our radios worked, right up until we saw the opening. It looked like a doorway carved into the wall, tall enough for a truck, but inside was nothing. Not darkness. Nothing. My flashlight beam hit the threshold and stopped, like it had struck glass. The floor in front of it held a line of muddy boot prints, fresh, leading straight in and ending cleanly at the edge. Sergeant Halverson keyed his mic. Echo 1, status check. Static. He tried again, switched channels, then shouted the call sign into the handset like volume could force an answer. Behind us, the tunnel lights didn't flicker. They just felt farther away. Then the corridor began pulling the sound out of us quietly. This channel documents frontline accounts like this one. Subscribe for future reports. We weren't supposed to be down there. The patrol was a straightforward perimeter sweep for a small training site tucked into the Blue Ridge. Fences, cameras, nothing sensitive on paper. But in late summer, the rains kept washing out the same access road, and someone higher up decided we'd start using the old maintenance corridors the Corps of Engineers had poured decades earlier. Our unit was a mixed security detail. 2 team leaders, a radio operator, and 3 riflemen, rotating 12-hour shifts with a simple brief. Check gates, check locks, log anomalies, and move on. No heroics, no exploring. That morning, we signed out a standard kit, handheld radios, chem lights, spare batteries, and a portable field phone that tied into the site's hardline. The tunnel entrance was marked with a stenciled number that didn't match our map, but the lock was new. Someone had been there recently. We logged it like we'd been trained. Unknown opening, structural anomaly, possible unauthorized access. Halverson ordered a halt and had Reyes, our radio man, run a quick comm check. Each of us keyed the handset in sequence, call sign, position, status, while Reyes listened for the repeater's courtesy tone. Nothing. The radios weren't dead. You could hear carrier when you keyed up, and you could hear static if you turned the squelch down. It was as if the network simply wasn't there. Hardline, Halverson said. Get the field phone. We carried a portable field set for exactly this kind of problem. When terrain ate the signal, when the repeater went down, when you needed something that didn't care about line of sight. Reyes clipped into the junction box we'd passed 10 minutes back, then called to us as he cranked. The handset rang in his own ear. No connection tone. No line. Like the cable ran into empty space. That was the first moment it stopped feeling like a maintenance corridor and started feeling like a boundary. Halverson moved us into a tighter formation, rifles still low. We weren't expecting contact. We were expecting a maintenance crew, or kids, or a contractor cutting corners. He told me to mark our position. I snapped a strip of orange engineer tape on a conduit and wrote the time on it with a grease pencil. 0917. I could hear my own breath inside my helmet. Everything else sounded damped. Not quiet, distant, like the tunnel had been padded. We backed up 10 meters and tried the radios again. Same result. Halverson didn't like staying blind, so he sent Caldwell and me forward to the threshold while the others held a rear security line. We approached slow, boots scuffing in the dust. The doorway filled the right side of the corridor like a missing wall. Up close it wasn't dark. Darkness still has depth. You can see the far surface if you give it enough light. This had no return. My beam hit the edge and stopped with a hard line, the way light stops on painted steel. I moved the flashlight in a circle and watched the cutoff follow the motion, perfectly crisp like the air had become a surface. Caldwell crouched and touched the concrete just outside the opening, then pulled his glove back and rubbed it between his fingers. Dry, he said. The boot prints were the part I couldn't fit into any normal explanation. They were fresh enough to have definition, but the mud was wrong for this tunnel. Different grit, darker, like creek bottom muck. The line of prints came straight in, toe forward, normal spacing. Then they ended at the threshold as if the person had stepped off a ledge. Halverson came up behind us and stared for a long moment. He wasn't the kind to dramatize anything. He ran the simplest play. We don't cross. We document. We pull out and report in person. That should have been the end of it. But when we turned back, the corridor behind us didn't look the same length. It's hard to explain without sounding like someone who wants it to be paranormal. I'm telling you what happened the way I'd put it in an incident statement. Distance cues degraded. The lights we'd passed were still on, still steady, but the warm pool of illumination seemed farther away than it should have been. We could see the next lamp. We could see the next after that. The problem was the space between them felt stretched, like the tunnel had been pulled from both ends. Reyes tried the field phone again. Same failure. Halverson took a breath, then made the call he was authorized to make. We'd move back as a unit, staying together, no one breaking line of sight, and we'd keep a running internal comm routine, spoken checks every 30 seconds, until we were in range of the surface repeater. We started back. At first, it was just small failures. A chem light cracked in Hayes's hand and barely glowed, the chemical reaction weak and sickly. My watch tick sounded too loud. Our boots didn't echo the way they had on the way in. When Caldwell spoke, it was like he was talking through a scarf. Halverson stopped us at the next junction and ordered another radio check. Still nothing. He switched to the backup frequency, then to the emergency channel. He didn't get a single pop of interference. No overlapping chatter, no distant carrier, no bleed. Just empty. "Reyes," he said. "What do you have?" Reyes shook his head. He looked pale, and he kept glancing back toward the doorway like his eyes wanted to avoid it, but couldn't. "It's like we're under a lid," he said, "like the antenna's capped." Halverson didn't answer that. He pulled out a grease pencil and wrote on the wall, "Exit," with a timestamp. Then he took out a length of comm cord and tied it around his wrist. "Anchor line," he said. "No one crosses past my shoulder. If you lose contact, you grab cord and you pull until you find a body." That's the kind of sentence you only hear when someone has decided they're dealing with a situation the manual doesn't cover. We moved again, slower. The corridor ahead looked right, but the farther we walked, the more it felt like we were walking into a place that didn't want sound. Halvorsen kept the spoken checks going, names, status, count, like he was keeping us real by forcing the air to carry our voices. Then, somewhere behind us, the doorway swallowed the last of the tunnel's normal acoustics, and our words started landing flat, as if the space had learned how to keep them. We reached the point where the tunnel should have dog-legged left toward the service stairwell. I knew it because I'd walked it twice the week before with a clipboard and a bored engineer explaining pipe runs. But the left turn wasn't there. The concrete continued straight. Same width, same ceiling height, same conduit on the same side, like someone had copied the corridor and pasted it forward. Halverson stopped, eyes tracking the walls for a seam. "Nobody say, 'lost,'" he said, voice low. "We are not lost. We are misrouted." He tightened the cord around his wrist and ordered us to pivot back toward the no-light doorway, not because we wanted to return to it, because it was the only fixed reference we had left. We walked. 30 seconds, then a minute, then 3. The lights stayed evenly spaced, but the distance never resolved. The exit signs we'd passed on the way in never appeared. My mouth went dry, and every time I swallowed it sounded like it belonged to someone else. Then we heard something that shouldn't have been able to travel in that tunnel. A single tap, like a boot heel on concrete. Halverson raised a fist. We froze. The sound came again. 2 taps this time, far ahead of us in the direction we were moving, the direction that was supposed to lead back out. "Challenge," Halverson said, and Caldwell called it sharp and procedural, the way you do when you don't want to admit you're scared. "Halt. Identify." No answer. Another tap. Then the faintest drag, like someone shifting weight. Halverson signaled and we advanced 10 meters in a slow bound. My flashlight beam cut the corridor, and for the first time since we'd turned around, the light hit something that wasn't just wall and pipe. There was a silhouette at the far end, human height, maybe a little taller, standing perfectly still in the center of the passage. Not backlit, not reflecting, just an absence shaped like a person. Reyes whispered, "That's not possible." Halverson spoke loud. "State your unit." The silhouette didn't move, but the sound did. The next tap came from behind us. Every head snapped. Another tap, closer. Then, inside my headset, A burst of radio static detonated so hard I flinched. For half a second I heard our own call signs, mine, Caldwell's, Reyes's, played back out of order like a recording being rewound and forced through the net. Halverson jerked the cord. Back! Back! Now! We retreated in a tight cluster, rifles up but nowhere safe to aim, because the corridor had learned how to put footsteps wherever it wanted, and the no-light doorway, our reference point, was no longer behind us. It was opening on our right, as if it had slid along the wall to meet us. Halvorsen didn't hesitate. He slapped a chem light on the floor at our feet, our own marker, our own proof, and ordered a hard retreat toward the doorway because it was the only thing that behaved consistently. The glow was weak, sickly, but it gave us a point to move around instead of through. We didn't run. Running makes gaps. Gaps are where people vanish. As we moved, the corridor kept trying to separate us with sound. Footsteps would land just off our shoulder. A heel tap would come from a wall that should have been solid. Twice I heard my own voice say my call sign in my ear, calm and wrong, like a training recording. Reyes ripped his headset off and threw it. The static stopped for him. It kept detonating for the rest of us. When we reached the doorway, the boot prints were gone. Not smeared, not covered. Gone. Clean concrete, as if the floor had been poured that morning. Halvorsen swore under his breath, then made us hold position while he tied the comm cord to a conduit bracket and wrapped the other end around his forearm. He took a breath like a diver. Two-man look, he said. 3 seconds. Light only. No crossing. Caldwell and I stepped to the threshold together. My beam died at the edge like before. Caldwell angled his light low, searching for any reflection, any dust in the air. For a heartbeat, something tapped from inside the void, right on the other side of where sound should have stopped. The conduit vibrated under Halversen's hand. The cord went taut as if a weight had tested it. Halversen yanked us back and cut the cord with a knife in one motion. Out, he said. Now. We backtracked by our tape marks, EO917, EO9226, EO934, each one still there, still readable, like the tunnel wanted us to leave as long as we didn't try to understand it. The moment we hit the stairwell, Reyes's spare radio chirped on its own. The repeater tone returned like a breath. On the surface, Command treated it like a security breach until Halversen handed over his notebook and the photos. After that, it became a closed-door conversation. By evening, the tunnel entrance was welded shut under armed watch, and every one of us signed a statement we were told would be classified for our own protection. 2 weeks later, our patrol rotation changed without explanation. Halversen was reassigned to an administrative post and stopped returning calls. Reyes requested a medical transfer and never spoke about the tunnel again. The rest of us were ordered to treat the incident as a mapping error, nothing more. I kept a copy of my notes anyway. The times, the tape marks, the way the radios failed only near that doorway. When I asked an engineer about the corridor years later, he stared at me like I'd named a room that didn't exist. The file was sealed. The corridor remained.